My name is Karen Kiefer, and I'm the director of the Church in the 21st Century Center, and we welcome you to another Espresso Your Faith Week event. I'm so excited about this because I'm old and I love talking to young people, and to just kind of get inside their journey and kind of see God's pull and God's grace. And hopefully our conversation tonight will illuminate that for all of us. I do want to tell you that this particular panel grew out of our magazine, which was just recently published this summer, and it's called Faith in Action. You might have seen it around campus, and it's filled with great pieces, and I highly recommend that you pick it up. Also want to thank Peter Martin, who's here tonight. He was the guest editor of this particular issue. And then also our associate director, Lynn Baradelli, who's in the back. And they delivered this baby, and it's absolutely beautiful. So we're very grateful for them. And then I'm very grateful because I get to be here tonight with you. And so I thought that would open up by just having each one of you spend a minute, maybe a minute 30, and tell us where you've been since you graduated college. And just give us a quick run, and then we're gonna dig deeper, and we're gonna go back. And this panel is really for our students so that they can learn from your journey and from your uncertainties and your challenges and your mentors and your faith. So Kevin, why don't we start with you? You all have the biographies of everyone, right? So this is Mr. Kevin O'Brien.
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy to be here with everybody tonight, and it's really an honor to be back at Boston College. I only graduated 2 years ago from the School of Social Work. I was a global social work master's student here. I'm originally from Davenport, Iowa, and I went to school in Iowa for my undergrad at Loras College, studying international studies, Spanish, and politics. And I knew I was very attracted by my undergrad in Iowa, but I wanted to go out and see the world and be immersed all over the place. And I really have. Throughout undergrad, I studied abroad in Argentina and Spain. And sometimes people say, whet your appetite now because you may not get another chance to travel, to be immersed, to do service, different things like that. I have tried to prove them wrong along the way because I've continued to move and be engaged in service work, social justice as much as possible. And it's kind of, I feel that pull along the way. So whether it's Catholic Charities in Washington, DC, or the Peace Corps in Mozambique, Catholic Relief Services in Honduras, or Jerusalem, West Bank, Gaza, or helping with refugee resettlement in the US, which has been my experience and my work of this last year. I'm constantly kind of pulled in different directions, and I'm just trying to follow that call. And so I felt that call to BC, and it's helped kind of spur me onwards.
Great. Alejandra, our BC roots are Alejandra Garcia, but she was just recently married as of a month ago. And Alejandra Aquino, yes, thank you, applause.
So I went to BC for my undergrad, and I majored in communications and minored in leadership and management. After I graduated BC, I served as a full-time missionary with an organization called FOCUS, which stands for the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. So I actually went back to campus, not to BC, but I worked with college students on 2 different campuses. I served at George Mason University, Northern Virginia for 2 years, and then I was team director at Westchester University in Pennsylvania. So I led Bible studies, took students to international mission trips during the breaks, took them to retreats, conferences, and basically helped students grow spiritually. And so I did that for 3 years, and then I left staff in 2020, and I started working at Ascension Press, which is a publishing and media company, and I work as a podcast associate product manager, particularly in digital media with podcast production. So I've been with Ascension for 2.5 years now, working in podcast production.
And Taiga.
Hey everyone, my name is Taiga Guterres. I went to undergraduate at Loyola Marymount University, and kind of during that time I was really interested. I actually wanted to join the Marine Corps, and through various experiences I ended up doing the RCIA, or the Right for Christian Initiation for adults, and joined the Catholic Church my senior year of college. And so instead of moving into the Marine Corps, I decided to join the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. So I spent 2 years serving abroad in Belize as a pastoral minister, and then I ended up spending an additional year in the Mexican side of the U.S.-Mexico border, working with deportees and refugees, before coming here to BC for my Master's in Theology and Social Work. And so now I work at the Institute for Advanced Jesuit Studies here on BC's campus, where really I think the work is to research and understand and communicate the Jesuit tradition, particularly within education.
So let's go back in time, okay? So go back to your undergraduate self, freshman year, sophomore year. I think freshman year, you're still drinking from a fire hose and trying to figure it all out. And then sophomore year, you're starting to think, should I be figuring this all out? And then, of course, you're panicked by junior year. And then senior year, if you haven't figured it out, then you're really panicked, which is crazy. That said, Taiga, so take us back in time, like you decided to join the Catholic Church when you were a senior. What were you thinking freshman year, sophomore year? Like, what kind of pulls you towards that? I'm curious.
Yeah, well, my freshman year, I actually didn't even know I was at a Catholic university, to be honest. And really, it was kind of that opportunity to be immersed in service work. I think really what had that initial pull was serving the homeless community in Los Angeles, and seeing the ways in which they relied on their faith, talked about faith. I remember a woman really asking, or telling me, oh, like, God bless you, and I had never heard that other than when someone sneezed. And so asking her, like, hey, like, what do you mean by that? And I will never forget, she's always turned to me and said, I guess what I'm trying to say is, thank you, and you matter. And I think for me, that was kind of the beginning of that questioning of what's the heart behind the language, to really explore what are people meaning in their hearts when they speak about faith, which really kind of led me to, my own journey I studied anatomy and physiology, and then kind of, having my rotations, clinical rotations, realizing there was something more than just tending to physical health that I felt drawn towards, and so then kind of having my own journey towards, spiritual health, mental health, and how to think about all those things holistically.
And like a focus on your heart,
Yeah,
and watching that kind of grow in the process. So did it take you until like junior year to think, oh, maybe I'm moving in a different direction here?
Yeah, I came in undecided, and I was undecided, undeclared for probably like a year. And even then, like moving in and out, I minored in English. And really, I think, through the experiences, and I think it wasn't, really until senior year, I wasn't even thinking about postgraduate service until I had mentors kind of talk to me about it. And so it ultimately became the thing I chose, but definitely not. It was definitely a winding path to get there.
Mm-hmm. Alejandra, tell us about your journey. So you come to Boston College, you're a communications major. I was too, yay. And what were you thinking? What path?
I honestly had no idea what I wanted to do with my major because communications is such a broad field, but I loved storytelling, I loved writing, I loved looking at how the media so profoundly shapes us, especially in the digital age. And so I was just really inspired to work in the communications field because I know that the stories that we share across many different mediums have a lot of power in shaping our lives, who we become, what we believe, what we do. And so I wanted to work in journalism or for a magazine, broadcast company, I wasn't sure. I just knew I loved writing. And I think eventually when I became really passionate about my faith, I knew what story I wanted to share. And I think that's what was hard figuring out when I was in undergrad. Like when you work in communications or marketing, you're always trying to sell an idea or get someone to do something by using the power of language. And I wasn't sure what I wanted people to do. Like, do I want them to buy this product? Do I want them to believe in this thing, in this mission? And for me, when I just grew so much in my faith, I think, Christianity is one of the most beautiful love stories of God to humanity. And I wanted to use the kind of modern communication platforms to continue spreading the gospel and kind of helping young people re-encounter this story, because I think it's very hard to kind of understand what Christianity really is about and how it's relevant to you as a young person. And so that sort of inspired me to work with my faith. And initially I became a missionary. And I wasn't really working directly in my field, but I was using a lot of the skills that I learned at BC. But then after I served as a missionary, I kind of went back to my field and started working at Ascension in the digital media unit. And so we are all creatives, we are all storytellers, and I work particularly in podcast production. And so I use my background extensively, because there's a lot of writing, a lot of kind of understanding your audience and communicating through podcasts, the faith. So, yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, because you're being very humble, because you're basically changing the way people are experiencing their faith, which is extraordinary. Before I get to you, Kevin, I have one more question. So for students here, like, when did the transformation start to happen in college where you started to really grow your faith? What was it? Was it a pivotal moment? Was it a professor? Was it, being on APA or campus ministry, or just?
Sure. I think it was a combination of different experiences. I was involved in Cura for a little bit, and I went on a few retreats, and that really kind of laid the groundwork. Then I started working at the Volunteer Service Learning Center as a communications coordinator. And so that was really neat, just a way to help students serve. And then more personally, I actually started going to Mass on campus. So not just on Sundays, but during the week there is Mass on campus. And I just found that it really centered me spiritually. And it really just grounded me spiritually. And so I just started going to Mass during the week, in between classes, and I started reading more about my faith and just educating my mind and really, reading books written by the saints and reading scripture. I wasn't a theology major, I was raised Catholic, but, and then I took some classes in the philosophy department my senior year. So I took a class on St. Thomas Aquinas. I took a class on philosophy of religion with Dr. Peter Kraft, and then obviously the core requirement, I took my freshman year, Introduction to Catholicism. And so I think it was a combination of my academic formation in the faith, and then serving, and then ministry with Cura, and then I would say most importantly, just encountering the Lord in the holy sacrifice of the Mass on campus. And that for me just like really grounded me spiritually, because I don't know, it was just a place where I could really encounter peace that I desperately needed, because it's not easy being a college student. There's a lot of pressure. So yeah, I would say just kind of having access to all these opportunities to grow in your faith, whether it's through academics, whether it's through service programs, or whether it's just going to Mass and praying. Just kind of having access to that at BC was really helpful for me.
And being open, just open to what feels right, and what comforts you and brings you peace, because that is the love of God, Kevin, so is there a country you haven't been to?
Yes.
I mean, your journey is just fast and furious and wonderful. So tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, because I if I can picture myself in your shoes here at BC or in college, I wouldn't have imagined many of the different things that I have done since graduating. And I had always been interested in Peace Corps. So I'd say hold on to those things that you've always been passionate about. You don't have to do it, but really consider, if that's something that's been nagging at you. I had to answer that call because Peace Corps had always been in my heart. I had an uncle who had done the Peace Corps before I was even born, and so I always grew up hearing stories of his service in the Dominican Republic. So that's sort of the journey that took me to Peace Corps in Mozambique, but many of the other things that I've done since in working with refugee resettlement, specifically with the Afghan population this last year, and I didn't anticipate that life would take me to live in Honduras and work for Catholic Relief Services, or Jerusalem and work with the Palestinian people. There's still a lot of places I haven't been, still other places that I'd love to go, but I do feel kind of very called by where is the crisis happening, where can I be of service? And I also think that can be, right around us too. You don't always have to go, and maybe you will never go halfway around the world, but that's okay. I think awareness, understanding, and sort of a seeking to help make things better in whatever way you can is really meaningful. And so I've tried to feel that and to feel that response, and yeah, exactly, to live it. It's been important to me, and it's certainly taken me on a circuitous journey. I was mentioning earlier, and I will share with you today, so I just finished this contract on Friday, and so I said, is it okay to have somebody like myself on the panel who's technically unemployed right now? I don't know if that's a great advertisement, but I also think it's calming in some ways to hear from people who have had a lot of shifts in their career, and I keep kind of taking on those opportunities which are maybe more adventurous, a bit more chaotic, detailed to those emergency responses. And sometimes there's a lot of uncertainty about what comes next, but it's worked out really. And there's so many things that interest me in so many ways that I can be of service, but we'll see what does come next. But yeah, it's just really calming to know that if it's rooted in faith, if it's rooted in something that you're trying to seek a more just world, things can turn out well for yourself, sure, but hopefully for everyone else too.
And I sense when I first met you, you're calm. I mean, most people that don't really know where they're going next week wouldn't be as calm as Kevin O'Brien. But I mean, it's a beautiful gift, And I want to get back in a few minutes because I want to know like a day in the life of Kevin O'Brien. Like, what does that even look like, Taiga, I want to go back to something that you said about how your encounter with the homeless, really changed your heart, your perspective, your journey, and even in your decisions to serve. Now, you were in Belize for what, 2 years? Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and then your decision to move on and get a dual degree at STM and in social work and serving in that regard?
Yeah, I think for me, this encounter with those who are on the margins or those who have less, for me it was kind of like this encounter or witness to the rawness of reality. And I think in a lot of ways, it taught me a lot about what it means to love and to be loved and those questions. And I don't know, I always kind of come back to that like chorus line of like, love is not a victory march, but it's a cold and broken hallelujah. And I think in a lot of ways for me, those service opportunities to be with those on the margins have really given me an experience of that or a witness to that. And I think for me, that's kind of where I just had these questions of how do I, think about the person in front of me, the chaos that's right there, but also to have that time, that research, that community to really think about the discernment part, like now what? And so I think, kind of being able to live into that a little bit and then think to myself, I want to kind of live into these questions a bit. and so we're really kind of pursuing school here.
That's well said, the way you said live into it, because I think we're so programmed to figure everything out. Like, I'm going to graduate, and then I have to do this, and then I have to do that. And instead, all three of you leaned in, right? You leaned into being a missionary for 3 years, Alejandra. And then Kevin, you're still leaning in and going everywhere. And then staying in Belize when you could have left. And instead of, it's almost like you felt like, this is okay. Like, I don't have to do this by the time I'm 27 or 28 or 22. You know, that's amazing. So, and a good lesson for the students to think, like, you don't have to figure it out right away. And you don't have to figure it out while you're here. Okay, so Alejandra, let's dig a little bit deeper into the podcast that's changing the Catholic world and how that all happened, because that was God working too. So many of you have heard of Father Mike Schmidt. Do you know of him? And if you haven't, Google him. But he has this podcast that you might even be able to share with us, like, was it a germ of an idea in a boardroom that you guys kind of came up with and then decided we're going to teach the world how to read the Bible in a year and a podcast? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because you were even surprised to be involved in that.
Yes, so I joined Ascension in 2020, in May of 2020, and then, so I was fairly new when the idea of the Bible in a Year podcast developed, and Father Mike approached our media team and said, you know, I want to read the Bible in a year. I listen to a lot of audiobooks and I listen to a lot of things, and it would be so neat just to listen to the Word of God as I'm, you know, going about my day, driving, cooking, and this was, you know, during the time where everybody was locked in. And so he brought that idea to the team, and the team said, yeah, let's go for it. We have this thing called the Bible Timeline, which is kind of a learning system that Jeff Cavins, who's a biblical scholar, developed to understand the story of salvation. So he places all of the books in the Bible within this framework that helps you understand you know, how all the books come together and what is kind of the narrative thread. So we use that to create a reading plan where you read through the entire Bible in 365 days, and you understand all of the covenants, you understand the story of salvation. And so with that reading plan, Father Mike started recording these episodes where he reads the Bible, you know, usually two to three different parts of different books of the Bible, and so he'll do that for about 20 minutes, and then he offers commentary for 10 minutes. And so it kind of was his idea. I think it was inspired by God. I think at that time it was providential because the world was deeply hurting through the pandemic. There was just a lot of suffering, a lot of pain. So many things changed, and I think humanity was challenged in a very profound way. And so it was kind of an opportunity for us to bring hope, and I think it was just perfect timing. And so we released it in January 1st of 2021. And you know, Father Mike already had a pretty strong digital presence. He was doing videos in our YouTube channel called Ascension Presents. And he's pretty well known, so I think that contributed to the success of the podcast. And essentially within, I don't know, like 24 hours, it rose to the #1 spot on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and it stayed the #1 podcast for 17 consecutive days, and I think it was like in the top 50 podcasts of all time on Apple Podcasts for the rest of the year. And so it was, I would say, a miracle. It was the first time that a religious Christian Catholic podcast had made it to the top of the charts, competing with all these different types of podcasts. But yeah, it's so simple. Father Mike, I think, always says, you know, I was doing all these videos for all these years, and and they never became that popular. And then I just read the Bible, and all of a sudden, it becomes my most popular work. And I think it's a testament to the power of the Word of God and how much the human heart hungers for it in different ways. And no matter where we're at in history, like, we just desperately want to know where we came from, where we're going, what is the purpose of life. And so, it was a really powerful experience. He just read the Bible, and I think his commentary really helped people to understand Scripture, because Scripture is so hard to understand without someone guiding you through it, and without understanding the context and how it all fits together, and the historical context, so that you're not taking things out of context. And most importantly, how does this story part of our lives, or how does my story fit into the great story that God has planned for me and for all of us? And so I think that's why it just resonated with so many people, because I think all of us can find our stories in the stories that are in Scripture, from all the different figures, from human suffering, joys, all the things. So it's just a year-long story, and people just really gravitated towards it.
And what about the stories too from the people who were listening to the podcast and how it changed them? Profound. And wasn't the stat like something crazy, like it was 1 million downloads in like some short amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, it has I have to double check the stats again, but it has over, I think, 1 million, it has about 100 million downloads.
Okay,
It's not unique listeners.
I was off by a little.
Downloads.
Yeah, which is really extraordinary. And then to be part of that.
Right, yeah, so I basically, it was a team effort. So there were a lot of different people working on the podcast, but essentially, to produce the podcast, we had to take the audio file, edit it, review Father Mike's commentary, write the title and description, post it to our hosting platform, that then pushes it out to all the podcast directories. And so I was kind of listening, making sure Father Mike was reading Scripture correctly, and listening to his commentary, and just kind of making sure every episode was being published on time at midnight, so that people could get it. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, really. Kevin, so let's talk about a day in the life of Kevin O'Brien, wherever you are. You talk about service and how you've served and worked for so many organizations, Catholic organizations. What are some of the things that you've done?
Yeah, it's really fascinating, because I didn't have a health background when I went to Peace Corps, but I became a health volunteer, and the importance of working alongside community members who live there every day and are still living there after I left. That was featured prominently throughout my Peace Corps service, and that's been a tenet that I've taken with me. The importance of working with others who are at the ground level, at the grassroots level, who have been at this a very long time, and sometimes they need resources, sometimes they need additional things, but trying to find solutions. I think that's kind of where my mindset always goes, is what do people have, and what are the resources that are going to be remaining there afterwards, and connecting those things a little bit. Maybe introducing, I love meeting people, and introducing people across different avenues or organizations. So one of the things in Peace Corps that we were busy doing was using the radio, which was very prominently listened to in our area of Mozambique, but to advertise about necessary health initiatives and connections to the hospital, about HIV, about malaria. And then in my most recent work, I'm more behind the scenes, working on operations to help make sure that our programs for Afghan evacuees have what they need, that they have all of the tools that are going to help make a classroom run, all of the supplies, and on time, and all the logistics. So I really like working behind the scenes, and kind of being solution oriented, strategic thinking, and that's not where I thought I would be as much. I didn't think I would be in all these different countries and whatnot, but a day in the life is changing as to the needs of the population, and then also with what resources we have, I guess. But it's really trying to make connections. And as some of my professors here at BC in the School of Social Work, we're always saying thinking outside the box is so important, because you may have a clear set of ideas, but putting them into practice, and making sure that they're going to be sustainable, that's really something that matters so deeply, and that the community gets. I mean, the community gets it more than anybody else. Organizations come in and they assist and they do wonderful things, but it's because of the people who are there who often are helping them to be sustained and make them work long afterwards.
So does anything scare you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
You're
things.
serving during COVID.
Yeah.
Malaria.
Yeah, I never had malaria during Peace Corps, but thought I might at some point. But yeah, I mean, going to different populations and corners of the world during COVID, it's an unnerving thing to kind of put yourself out there. But at the end of the day, and I think the importance of public health and vaccinations and things like that too. But I think at the end of the day, you can't stay in your home forever, and you can't just stop living. There's always people who need assistance. One really incredible way that I got to serve to be, and when I say serve, these are jobs along the way too. So it becomes your life's work. We were talking just before the panel began about when sort of the lines get blurred, and your faith is your work, which is your employment, which is your passion. They kind of blend together. But I got to work with the state of Massachusetts and Partners in Health to help with contact tracing efforts here in Massachusetts during that first wave of the pandemic, the first couple waves.
And we were leading that.
Yeah. Massachusetts was definitely on the front lines, and I was doing that remotely from Iowa, but it was a really incredible experience to sort of be invited, sort of quote unquote, into people's homes over the phone to see what they need to assist them in maybe getting groceries delivered, to work with mutual aid networks and different organizations that were on the ground, putting themselves out there and at risk themselves, but in order to help others. So there's a lot of things that are scary, but I think there's a calling for all of us to kind of go beyond and to make sure that we can bridge the gaps. And if we have a moment where we're too scared to act, or we're being challenged in a certain way, hopefully somebody else will come to our aid. So I think it also is sort of that idea that we have to help because we may be the ones in need in the future, and we hope others will help us too.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned that the whole reason for us doing this panel was for our students, so that they can get a peek into your life. And so what would you say, and I'll start with you, Taiga, so you can start to think about this, to a student that's thinking, I want to move in the service area, or I was just talking to a student today who's Carroll School of Management. He said, I'm feeling the pull towards working in the nonprofit world. You all seem so calm and so happy, and you've done so many different things, but what kind of advice would you give students being more intentional, finding a mentor? What would that be?
I think for me, one of the things that I felt like, or continue to feel that I'm continuously relearning, is this sense from the Jesuit tradition, from all the things of the Jesuit tradition, cure personalis, or cure the whole person, or the magis, and all these concepts. But I think the one that's really been has rooted me in I think different transitions or discernment processes is the whole notion of the Jesuits really focusing on what they call our way of proceeding. And I think for me, it's always having that anxiety of like the what, like what's going on, what am I supposed to do, what should I do, and instead I think what for me has been helpful is that Jesuit sense of the process. What is my way of proceeding? And for me, that's kind of shifted the focus on whether it's prayer and saying like what should I pray versus how do I be prayerful. How should I help, or what should I do to help, versus how can I be helpful? And I think for me, instead of that discernment process, kind of, how should I go about the process of this decision? And having mentors, or having that focus on what are the things I want to be grounded in through this? Because I think, from my experience at least, going through a decision, I can change my mind or like have a different thought in an hour or the next day. And so I think, really thinking through that process, thinking about what will be my way of proceeding through this, and what kind of community should I be talking to, or what kind of opinion should I consider, and what state of mind should I be in when I make these decisions. So kind of thinking through that, being able to have someone to talk to that you trust, to be able to, one, think through my process, and then have those people to discern with.
And being patient,
Absolutely.
which is the hardest thing for all of us, I think. Kevin or Alejandra, want to offer up something?
Sure. I think it's tough to think about what are the answers that I'm going to need to know tomorrow or next week or beyond. And I've done the same thing as Taiga about going through so many different options and considerations of what I want to do, how what would be the ideal situation to live my life, to live this next year of my life and be purposeful. And I think I keep coming back to, and sometimes I have to remind myself of my own advice or advice that others have given me, but it's not all going to be perfect. So just plan on that right now. But it's also good to have a plan and then be open to other possibilities along the way. I don't think for myself there's one exact spot that I need to be or else I won't be happy, or I need to be or else I won't be helpful. I think there's a lot of different ways that I can help, that I can serve, that I can sort of do my best to follow my calling. I've tried to listen to people around me, certainly family, friends, mentors, and I think reading, reflecting, growing, and I have felt a pull towards different faith-based organizations and whatnot. One thing I always like to share is when I was working at Catholic Charities in Washington, D.C., we were working very much with vulnerable populations every single day, and people would often ask, and this is said across different organizations, but people would say, well, it's amazing all the work you guys are doing, and all the people that you're serving are Catholic? And we're like, well, no. I mean, a lot of them are not Catholic. Maybe, most of them are not Catholic. Even many of the employees at Catholic Charities aren't Catholic. But it's not, why are we doing it for them because of their faith tradition, or even our own individual faith tradition. It's sort of the organization is rooted in faith. And even if it's not like Peace Corps, terrific organization, part of the US government, it's a place that I can really feel a connection to and feel that mission-driven sort of pull. And I just try to follow that. I really do. And it's weaving its way through my life.
and also kind of embracing doubt,
Yeah.
self-doubt. I was saying earlier to all of you, I mean, you have to have done something, and where you're there, you're like in Belize, or you're in another country, and you're like, where am I? Like, what am I doing? And just kind of jumping and finding your wings, I guess, and just, that's why we have our faith,
Yeah.
And when you were talking about the big questions that we need to ask ourselves, how can we not think of Father Michael Himes and his questions, and what brings you joy, and what does the world need you to be, and be gentle with yourself, as Father Casey Gomer would say, and kind of open yourself up to that. I want to open up this conversation to some students or anyone in the room that might want to ask you all a question. So if in fact you do, just stand up. This room has really good acoustics, so I don't know that you need a mic, but you could probably take this one, Eileen, and then pass it around.
Hey there, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to, especially in the undergrad experience, I thought a common theme was the need for reflection when you're deciding and discerning what's next, and how do you react to different situations in life. Could you speak a little bit to how you do that in in undergraduate college when we are so busy, and then also a little bit to how does that change post-grad as we go and find our careers?
Something that I would say is like pay attention to what moves your heart, like what classes, what experiences make you feel fully alive, where you feel like I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or I'm truly experiencing joy, like learning about this or doing this. Because I think all of us have certain gifts and talents, and when we are using them, we know this is where I'm truly free and this is where I'm truly alive. So pay attention to what classes have like stood out to you the most, what experiences you've had that you felt like this is, when I do this, I am truly myself and I feel like I am making a difference in what I'm doing. So I think just like being very attentive to that. So how is God maybe moving you in a certain direction by kind of discerning, okay, I feel joy, I feel peace doing this, I'm interested in that. So I think that is something very practical that helps you kind of figure out, okay, not this direction, but maybe more this direction. And then just try things. You don't know if something's for you unless you try it. So don't be afraid to take that step. Try things that are scary and new, because that's the only way you find out if that's where you're supposed to be. And it's okay if you realize this is actually not what I'm supposed to be doing, or I thought I would come in studying, I don't know, English, but now I want to go study, I don't know, chemistry. You know, it's okay to have those detours because you're still figuring out who you are. I mean, this is like 4 years, you're away from home, you have so much freedom. So don't be afraid to try things and fail, because that's the only way that you can find out, okay, maybe I'm supposed to be doing this other thing. So I don't know if that's helpful, but.
Do you have any other questions?
One other thing I'll just add is just running the mic up. Oh yeah, another thing is some of my friends, are quite wise, and so leaning on your friends around you, it doesn't have to be somebody with a big title or with years of experience. I mean, put your trust in, those who you feel comfortable with as well, who know you really well, and don't be afraid to go outside the box. And just to add, I think that's all really good advice.
Oh, great presentation. I really appreciated the stories, listening to all these stories. I'm a product of the 60s. I graduated from college in the 70s. I just wanted to ask you a question, since you had some, foreign experience. The one issue that no one ever talks about is the 21 years of war, $8 trillion spent, and I don't even know if BC, Boston College, has a peace group or whatever it is. But I'm just wondering if this foreign policy affected your decision-making or some aspects of your decisions.
I think I've always found it really important to be involved, to be as well versed as I can be. There's always more to learn, but I think having hopefully an optimistic but also a critical lens for things is really important, and I think that goes for the organizations that we're a part of, our government, officials, and around the world. I like to hold people to a really high standard, myself included, and so I'm not always going to be happy with decisions of the U.S. government and positions that candidates are taking and things like that. And I think it's all connected. It's certainly very connected, and decisions by countries to engage in warfare have very negative consequences for human life and for the world around us, nature and everything. And so, you know, I've kind of more gone, I thought I might have gone more the political route or something like that, and working for candidates and whatnot, and elected officials, but I've kind of chosen more to be on the nonprofit side because it's where I see a very direct connection to people and response to issues. But I think it's interesting because there's all different organizations, all different careers that people could have. You can play a role in all of that, and I think, you know, public advocacy on different issues that are important to you and that you see are affecting human life around you. Advocate for what you believe in, and you know, certainly participate in voting, and you know, and be active to try to create the world that we really want.
Faith in action.
Yes, exactly, faith in action.
One final question. So what's next? I don't know that you can answer that, Kevin, but like, what's next for all of you? You think? Or praying.
I think, at least for me, I actually just entered into transition, and this focus, for me, I think maybe to touch a little bit closely on what both those questions were, and kind of what you were already saying as well, is kind of there was a Jesuit that once told me the hymn goes, take and eat, not sit and look. And you know, I think there's an element of that, right? Of like having these experiences, you know, meeting people on the margins, or you know, encountering the ways in which U.S. policy has really impacted, you know, my time in Belize, my time in Mexico, being there during, you know, the Trump administration, being there when the caravans arrived from Central America, and I think, for me at least, there's an element where there's another Jesuit who also said, like, take your experiences and knead them into the bread that you will break for others. And I think, for me, I've kind of found that to explore the Jesuit tradition, to think about the formation in education. And so I kind of find myself now in this new role to really think about, you know, exploring the Jesuit tradition of formative education. You know, how can that be translated to today, and how do we wrestle with the same questions in light of, you know, seeing the world with new eyes, but from a deeply grounded tradition. So now I'm kind of in this question of education. How do we form people with these questions?
I hope to continue working at Ascension. I really do feel like it's that place where I'm able to do something that I know the world really needs. And so it's been a blessing being there, and so I want to continue working there, hopefully creating more faith formation resources digitally to reach people no matter where they're at. And then personally, I just got married, and so I'm very excited just to, now that I'm in my vocation, to be a wife, God willing, a mother. And I think something just to remember is sometimes, you know, we want to make a difference in the world, and we feel like we have to do this big thing. We have to go abroad or like do this huge thing. And sometimes it's just loving the person in front of you, loving your roommate, loving your parents, loving your friend. And so I'm excited to start changing the world just with loving my family, and loving my husband, my kids, God willing, one day. And that is really another way you change the world, is loving those that are directly in front of you that God has placed. So I'm just excited to do that. There's nothing grand and glamorous about it, but I think sometimes in just doing the small things with great love, as St. Therese said, you can really change the world profoundly. So
I think that's pretty grand. Yeah, big reminder. And Kevin?
Yeah, you know, I'm kind of reflecting and praying about that myself, and seeing what might come next. certainly it has to be sort of granted with an opportunity as well. I mean, I could certainly go volunteer in different corners of the world, but I'm kind of applying to different places and seeing where I get an offer and what seems right at the same time. And I think that may be overseas, that may be domestically, and I'm also considering exactly what Alejandra was saying, within my own community, which I've been a bit nomadic, but my roots are in Iowa, and I have a lot of family roots in Washington, D.C. as well. So what does it mean to work for social justice? And it doesn't have to be halfway around the world. I've done that a lot, and maybe I'll continue doing that. I'm certainly interested, but maybe at least for a while, I would stick closer to home and see how I can work for some social justice oriented cause, whether that's more education or food related, lots of different things, because I think there's a lot of ways that we can help, and whether that's you're a business major and you're going to work for a company, maybe you help that company to be more socially conscious and social justice oriented. There's good to do in every corner, and so I'm considering that for myself, and I'm sure that's part of what brought you here tonight to maybe go further in your own journey. You may not come away with the answers, but hopefully you continue reflecting.
Which is important.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank all of you for coming. Really appreciate your time and your effort and all the work that you're doing, to keep faith alive in our world and to inspire others to do the same, because we all have a contagious faith, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to share that with other people and embrace our faith in action, which is what this is all about. So thank you for coming.